Also, before we get going, we'd like to recognize that we are webcasting from and to many different parts of Alberta today. And the province of Alberta is located on Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 territory, and is a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples. So I'm Barb McCaffrey, welcome, and I'm joined today by my ACT colleague, and Jill Heinzman. And we also have support from some other team members, including Chris Diamond and Kylie Kidd-Wagner. And we're very pleased to welcome Stephanie Balcamo from Edmonton Zone CII today, who will also be sharing some information in the webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the team tools, what information is generated and how to use it, and how your quality improvement team can support you. So this is a webinar specifically for clinic managers of primary care and or primary care clinics, primary care mixed clinics. And we're glad that you're able to join us today. So in order to get to know you, we are going to ask you to complete our first Menti poll of the day. So go to menti.com, enter this code, and we would like to see where you are from today. Okay, quite a mix. So we've got Edmonton Zone and some Calgary Zone, lots from the Edmonton Zone, but we do have that full spectrum from North, Central, Calgary, and South as well. So welcome, everybody. Okay, so we'd also like to know where you are in your CII CPAR journey. If you're already live, you've been signed up, or you're at the interest phase, or you're still thinking about it. Oh, we've got quite the mix. We already have quite a few signed up and live clinics. Excellent. Today's content will be particularly pertinent for you, as well as some that are in the interest phase. Lovely. Okay, we've got a good even spread there. Thank you for completing this. Okay, so we are going to be talking about today what happens after go live. So at go live, you're getting ready. You've put up some health collection notice posters, you've taken down those old Netcare posters, and or you've incorporated that content into your website or forms as to communicate to patients that you'll be participating. Participants in the clinic are aware of the mapping from their EMR to the Community Encounter Digest, and the tools are helpful for that. Next, you're panel ready. So your panels are maintained and you'll be proofing those lists before they go up to CPAR for the first time. And you're aware of Go Live Day, which has been scheduled with eHealth Support Services, and everybody on the team is aware at the clinic what that day is for Go Live. So what happens after Go Live? And we'll be going into more detail today of this information. At Go Live, your EMR is connected to CI, CPAR, and to the rest of the system. Encounters begin to flow that very first day, and you'll see them the next day in Alberta Netcare. The first panel will be uploaded as per the schedule of your vendors. As well, e-notifications are flowing back to the clinic, and primary providers will receive them in the EMR. But this doesn't happen until after your first panel has been uploaded. And then once that first panel has been uploaded, you also have some new reports available to you at the clinic to understand your demographic mismatches as well as your conflict reports. But as each stage that you go along, you have processes in place. And we're going to talk about those processes for the panel lists, for the e-notifications, as well as for managing panel conflicts. And these are all things that will have to happen after Go Live. So what are some of those tools that you're going to want in your toolbox to get you going with CI, CPAR after Go Live? So a couple of the key tools are the team toolkit, as well as the clinic journey checklist. The team toolkit is quite deep and goes into detail in many areas. And you can pull out the clinic journey checklist independent of the team toolkit, or you can access it within the team toolkit. It's on pages 35 to 56, but that gives you an overview of what's going on. Next, we also have specifically a post-implementation checklist. And I believe that the link is going to be in the chat for you so that you can have access to that. This gives you very specific activities that you're going to want to address post-implementation, and it gives you guidance on how that works. We're going to refer to it more throughout today. We know that you probably pulled out the EMR guides before you went live, in terms of understanding the configuration and go live. Post-implementation, those EMR materials are also going to be useful when you look at your workflows associated with paneling, and or if you do have any consultants in your clinic uploading consult reports. And again, the maps to the EMR for the consult reports might be something that you'll refer to again after go live. We also have some specific materials for different team members filling different roles. There is a guide for the access administrator for the Central Patient Attachment Registry. And if you're a clinic manager, you are likely your clinic Netcare Access Administrator, and likely may fill also the role of the CPAR Access Administrator. So that guide is available to you. For team members filling the role of the Panel Administrator for the Central Patient Attachment Registry, there is a detailed guide on how that works. And they'll be referring to that probably after go live as they need to go back in and get some reports. As well, we have posted on the website in the CPAR panel resources page a guide specific to probably the person filling the CPAR panel administrator role on what to do with conflict and mismatch reports. So this is newly posted recently, and that's available for download as well. It can be a very useful toolkit. Once you go live, your vendor will be uploading your panel, and you should be aware of what that date is for your clinic. It's the 8th for MicroQuest, 10th of the month for TELUS, and the 12th of the month for Curo. Before that first panel upload, you're going to produce the list in the EMR and know what your number of patients on the panel is. After the vendor has uploaded it for you, you can go into the Central Patient Attachment Registry. There's instructions on the guide, and you definitely want to go in to make sure that that number is what you expect. And that's something we'd recommend that you do on a monthly basis, so you're aware of what your panel is and how many have been uploaded to the registry. And it tells you on your panel submission results summary if any have errored out, or if there's reasons that some of those patients did not upload to the registry. If they did not upload, there are message errors, and this guide tells you exactly what those are. A simple example is a deceased patient, especially on the first upload. If you didn't know you had a deceased patient on the panel, CPAR won't let them go into the registry because they say they're deceased. Provincial Client Registry and Person Directory says that this patient is deceased, so they can't go in. But there's other reasons. An example might be an incorrect birth date, and it will tell you those errors as well. So once you're going, you're going to be getting some information back at the clinic, and I'm going to pass it back to Angèle, who is going to talk about that information that you get back and how you can start using it at the clinic.
Yeah, thanks, Barb. So the first one I want to talk about are the CPAR reports. So those demographic mismatch reports and conflict reports. So let's look at what you could use them for in a little more detail. This is just a slide that you may have seen before that really talks about the schedule of uploads and reports and how that works with each EMR. So the important thing to know is those panel conflict reports are available by the 2nd of the month, but when the panels are actually submitted sort of happens at different times. So 8th of the month for HealthQuest, 10th of the month for TELUS, and the 12th of the month for Curo. And then all of the algorithms in the background start working around the 22nd. And then, the conflict reports will come out on the 2nd. So this is the demographic mismatch and deceased patients report. If you have the team toolkit handy, or if you want to just make a note, page 42 talks about how to start looking at processes around managing some of those demographic mismatches. And we wanted to just ask you another question in a poll. So if you go back to your Mentimeter, it's the same code. We wanted to just ask, and this is a free text question, what kind of demographic mismatches have you seen? It's interesting, lots of birth dates coming up. Wrong address, phone number, name misspelling. That's interesting. I would have thought that the name would come up more. Okay, here we are, got a few. Short instead of a long name. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to answer that question to Aaron in the chat. HealthQuest clinics no longer have to submit the panel manually. I believe that was updated fairly recently, and now they go up automatically as well, just like the other EMRs. So yeah, you guys, I picked up on a few of these. some of the gender mismatches. And so we know that in terms of the Alberta registry, you can have a gender of X, but not all of the EMRs are able to provide that. So really the key thing is that the Alberta registry and their record in the EMR should match. But yeah, sometimes that isn't always possible. We could talk a little bit about that a bit more in the Q&A. Patients do move and change address. So we did see that on the Mentimeter there that you mentioned address and phone number mismatches, but actually that doesn't prevent anything from happening with CPAR. So those don't prevent panels going up. We do know that there's a known issue around HealthQuest only having 12 characters for first name and last, or first name, I think, and that's being worked on between HealthQuest and Alberta Health. And we also have heard from some clinics, of course, that the first demographic mismatch report was pretty long. The good news is once you've worked through that first demographic report, the next ones should be smaller unless you're adding lots of patients. But really those mismatches will only happen once if you take care of them. And then it also makes sure that your panel is a bit smoother when it uploads to CPAR. So we also have the conflict reports. And these are where you see your patients who are paneled to another provider. Why bother worrying about panel conflicts? Well, one of the main things would be around coordinating chronic disease management and preventive screening. So, really, are we still doing your PAP? Are we still responsible for scheduling your complete physicals? Those kinds of things, just making sure that really you're not duplicating effort that's happening elsewhere in the health system, but also just so that, resources are being used wisely and all of that. And then also e-notifications actually do go to more than one provider if they're on more than one provider's panel. So resolving those conflicts really do help around making sure that, we're using resources efficiently with regard to preventive screening and stuff. But that message, the bottom one on the screen there, just talks about how Albertans who do have high relational continuity to a family doctor are much less likely to be hospitalized and have lower mortality. So we wanted to ask you one more poll, and that is around how have you used your conflict reports that you've received so far? The Mosaic's process map, is that Mosaic PCN has a process map for that? That's good to hear. Attachment, continuity, calling to verify attachment, that's great. So a few of you have used your conflict reports. There's also a great part of the post-implementation checklist that helps walk you through what to do and how to develop a conflict management process. So that's on page 3 of the post-implementation checklist. So it's really helpful. You can walk through all of those steps and see where you're at with your processes in clinic. So we wanted to just tell you a story from one of the Edmonton Zone doctors, Dr. Shute. He's the board chair at Edmonton Southside PCN. And he talks about how before CPAR, he knew his patients probably went to other providers, but he wasn't aware. And really that disorganized and discontinuous care or access to care really goes unnoticed to most providers, but it is costly to the system. It can be frustrating for providers, and it can also result in inferior care for patients. So now, conflict reports initiate conversations with patients, communication between providers, and improve continuity of care. So Dr. Shute was saying that when he first went live on CII CPAR, he didn't have a process in clinic to deal with the conflict reports. And then he received a letter from another provider thanking him for his care of their patient, but that patient would now be cared for by the other physician. And Dr. Shute reflected that, he was quite impressed with the professionalism of that letter, and he's started to use that as a model for managing his own panel patients going forward. So I don't know if any of you have seen one of these, but it's called a panel change notification, and some people are using a template similar to this that just outlines like who the patient is, who the former physician was, and who the new physician will be. And Dr. Shute said, it was great because he was able to then, manage any loose ends for that patient and then inactivate the patient in their EMR. So e-notifications, we've talked a lot about those already, or mentioned them a few times anyway. We have a video from Dr. Shute just talking about the value of those for him.
With the direct notifications that come in, these encounter notifications that come right into our EMR, the physician gets them. They're on my list now. They're in my inbox, if you will. My staff have access to that. They can still do the same work. That goes things right into my inbox. They're their emergency encounters, their day surgeries, their hospital admissions, and their hospital discharges. We can see that process, and it's in my clinic. One of the things that maybe shouldn't have surprised me, but that stood out was that our doctors are actually really pleased to get that notification directly to them. And prior to this, the way they found out about a discharge was that the staff had gone through this workaround process and booked an appointment for the high-risk people. So we find out that they've been discharged from hospital when we realize they like having an eye on it. Yeah, we're doing the lay scores, but if they've got specific concerns for a patient, they can immediately order, hey, let's bring this person in. Hang on a second, does this one really need to come in? Can we do this by the telephone? And so the direct involvement of a physician in this whole process is something that I think was really appreciated, and that the e-notifications really enable. And it triggers some extra team communication, and within our clinic for those patients just a little bit better.
So you can hear how Dr. Shute feels about those e-notifications and how useful they are for him as a physician, even though he knew that that process was kind of being taken care of in the background. But now as a physician, he's in control of the information about his patients being discharged. So this is just an example of what it looks like. As he said, it comes a couple of times a day, and it refers to those discharges from hospital and admissions and day surgery. And on page 4 of that post-implementation checklist, there is a checklist around reviewing processes around what happened in the hospital, or sorry, around what happened to that patient, and looking at who in the team needs to take care of that, and who could create a specific protocol, say for hospital discharges, etc. And looking at maybe doing an improvement meeting after the first week or two of receiving e-notifications, see what you might want to do with those. So the Community Encounter Digest, hopefully most of you have seen this before. This really gives a great picture of what care is happening in the community for a patient. So we know that emergency physicians have been finding this very valuable. And really, this is that summary of information that's informing the care of your own patients when they're in the care of other providers. So back in, I think it was 2017, a new area was created on Netcare right here called Community Reports. And that's where you can find the Community Encounter Digest. And your data will flow up to Netcare going forward from the go live date. Anything from before that go live date doesn't flow to Netcare. So again, on the post-implementation checklist, there is a section around encounters. It's really important once you go live or around the go live time that you check 3 recently seen patients in their CED, just to make sure that everything is coming up in the way that you expect it to. So for example, if there's any inappropriate information being uploaded, sometimes people use the encounter field for other pieces of information, or if there's any blank fields or anything like that. So this is a really great part of that post-implementation checklist to have a look at. And finally, we have consult reports. So these are reports for any sort of consultation. And again, there was a new section there in Netcare that's called consultations. If you hover over any of the consults that are there, it'll give you some information about whose consult report it is, where they came from, etc. And this is what it looks like. So this is just like a consult report that you would have faxed over from a clinic. But the nice thing here is that it kind of represents your clinic. And so other providers will start to see your clinic letterhead, and they might be made more aware that you as a specialist are available to give that kind of care and for those types of referrals. So I'm going to pass this over to Stephanie. She is joining us today. She's a practice facilitator with lots of experience from both Edmonton Southside PCN and Westview PCN. And she's going to talk a little bit about how quality improvement team can help.
Yeah, so it's a little repetitive, and I'm going to echo a lot of the same things that Angel and Barb recently talked about. So in my experience, conflict reports is a great opportunity to have a conversation with your teammates and review it together. So talking about, were some of these conflicts expected, were others surprises, how would we like to approach this as a team? Are we going to call the patients, and who's the best the team member to reach out to those patients? Using a script is is highly recommended. This can be a fun and interesting time to get a sense of where your patients are traveling outside of your clinic. The resolution work is not urgent. However, it might be annoying to continue seeing the same names pop up over and over. So if there's an opportunity to fix it, it might be a motivator. And I love the spirit of dealing with the conflict reports, to let the patient know we're just updating our records to guide us with the type of care to provide you with. Are we your family physician that is supposed to be coordinating your complex health matters, or are you using us just as a walk-in or episodic type of clinic? Again, lots of ideas in the CII CPAR team toolkit. So this is just an example of scripting. I won't review it, and if this is sent out, you can review it on your own. There's lots of different ways that you can approach this conversation with the patient over the phone if that's how your clinic chooses to deal with the conflicts, and this is one of them. And so the next slide. So demographic mismatch. Like Angel was talking about, one situation that we encountered was, the incorrect sex labeled in the EMR on a child, or a sex that was different from what was in net care. And, just as an example, how that particular clinic chose to deal with it. Well, they looped back with the doctor. The doctor couldn't confirm what the real sex was. So they decided not to call the parents to confirm, and that's sort of intuitive. It's a kind of maybe an awkward question to phone someone and have a conversation about. So they're on HealthQuest, and they decided to indicate on a critical note and address it opportunistically when the family comes back to the clinic. The physician was aware of the plan, and that's how they're going to deal with that. Like Angela mentioned, in HealthQuest, there's mismatches that happen because the field in the EMR is not quite long enough to accommodate some of the longer names. And so those are examples that might be kind of coming up over and over again. And I think HealthQuest is aware of that, and they'll deal with that. And then next slide. Going one step further and addressing a demographic mismatch with the patient, there is a link in the toolkit. And I just wanted to give a personal example. So my address changed recently. And so I wanted to see, okay, well, what was this, process going to be like? And so I clicked on the link, and it looked like I had to, download a form, print it out, fill it out, and mail it in. And I thought, wow, that's kind of onerous. And there was a couple of pieces that were a little unclear to me. And I thought, if I'm having a little bit of trouble navigating this, I wonder, for other people, if they might be having the same kind of experiences. So somebody from Alberta Health actually called me in follow-up to my letter to change my address. And I asked them if they knew about CII CPAR. It was a really interesting conversation, because I'm going to take every opportunity to spread the word that I can. And they didn't know about CII CPAR, but they thought, wow, this is great work that's happening in the community to try to reconcile, the community EMR with Netcare. And she referred me to this other link, which I've indicated on the bottom of this slide, where there's a phone number. And so I just wanted to put a plug out there for anybody, giving instructions to patients on how to resolve, a piece of information that's not correct in Netcare, or not the correct piece that Alberta Health has. There's a phone number that they can use, that they can call to speak with someone, and then sort of look at next steps from there. So I just thought that was kind of a neat example to share. And then e-notifications. So, like Ron Shute, Dr. Shute was saying, he thought it was really interesting to receive them. And that's what I've heard across the board. Physicians love knowing where their patients are at in the system. Some conversations that you can have with the physicians are, what do you think about them? How many are you getting per week? What have you been doing with them? Tell me about that. And is there someone else that can help you with that? Or is there another team member that could support you? Sometimes the information is just nice to know, and sometimes no action's taken. And then sometimes another team member, like a nurse, is work listed, or like Dr. Shute said, can have access also to that list. And maybe there's an opportunity to reach out to that patient to book an appointment, for example, for those higher readmission risk patients. Yeah, and so that is how I have approached all of the wonderful things that are generated from CI CPAR. Back to you, Angel.
And that's a really good point you made about whether you reach out to that patient or not. I know that one of our physician champions in the province was saying that she's had the experience where she's phoned because of an e-notification, and the patient was actually on their way back from the hospital still in the car. So the nice thing about e-notifications is it does give the physicians that much more immediate ability to connect with their patients that are moving in and out of hospital than they were before. Because she was saying that prior to e-notification, sometimes it would be up to even 10 days before she would hear that someone was in or out of the hospital. So thanks for that, Stephanie. So we're just wrapping up now, and we have some opportunity, some time for questions. But before we get to that, there's more information and resources on our ACT website. So if you're not familiar with it, it's act.albertadoctors.org. And there is a CII CPAR section where you can find lots of information and resources, whether you're a practice facilitator, a clinic manager, an administrative staff member. And then there's all sorts of great information about your EMR as well in there. So hopefully we've given you a taste of some of the documents that are out there that will help you walk through some of the new process you might want to. Well, thank you so much for coming out today. We really appreciate you joining us, and we would love to hear from you. So if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us as mentioned and on the slide, and we will be in touch with you with the survey and links and all sorts of other useful information. So thanks again for coming out today, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.